Thank you, Moose. Here's a look at the championship Sunday slate on CBS, streaming on Paramount+. Chiefs and Ravens. Baltimore has been taking late money through 3.5, 4, and 4.5 as we sit on this Sunday afternoon. Then out in Santa Clara, same goes for the 49ers. News about Deebo Samuel's availability has pushed that line from 6.5 back to 7, and then over that key number of 7, currently sitting at 7.5 against the Lions. All right. Back here with Brady and Pete, and before we get into your matchups and picks, we're going to tackle a couple of dominant storylines here. And Pete, I'm going to start with you with Kansas City, because we said up until this postseason, the road in the AFC to the Super Bowl went through Arrowhead. It doesn't anymore, but it still goes through the Chiefs.
And Patrick Mahomes. And look, we've become accustomed to this, right? Patrick Mahomes in a championship game, only this one's on the road. Look, that's tough to deal with. It's a tough place to play. You know that place is going to be jumping. But if I could take any quarterback in the league on the road in a championship game, I'm taking Patrick Mahomes.
Of course, and I think, look, Patrick Mahomes is arguably the most talented passer maybe in NFL history. I think when you look at the Dan Marino, Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes obviously in that category. What I think impresses me the most is for sometimes getting that gunslinger mentality or the way he's improvising and creating plays, he never gets enough credit for his decision-making in big-time moments down the stretch, in particular in the playoffs. And that's what stands out the most to me. When you looked at the AFC Championship game and the AFC Conference in general and who it went through before this run with Mahomes, it was Tom Brady. And it was the exact same thing with him. When the game was on the line, he made the right football decision. He made the high football IQ decision. Patrick Mahomes does the same exact thing. And if I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan, that's what I'm concerned about. When the game's on the line, Mahomes doesn't press. He seems to make the right play, right decision at the right time. And with Lamar Jackson, you know he's going to be hungry and ready to try to show everyone and prove to everyone he can get past Mahomes and get to a Super Bowl.
So as we take a look at Mahomes as an underdog, by the way, fantastic. And let me just go then, Brady, to where you picked up with Lamar Jackson, because we've seen before Tom Brady's been a Chiefs disruptor in the AFC, and Joe Burrow's been a Chiefs disruptor in the AFC. What's at stake for Lamar here in terms of trying to add to that list?
Well, I think it's continuing to build on his legacy that he's creating for himself in this league. He's going to be a two-time MVP, but he wants to get a Super Bowl appearance. He said it on draft day when everyone else passed up on him, but the Baltimore Ravens, they traded up to that 32nd spot to get him, and then they signed him to that extension. So now he's got the opportunity to prove to everyone he's the quarterback that he thinks he is, and that the Baltimore Ravens signed him to that contract to be. And I think the biggest hurdle for him this year has been a new system, and he's been able to do so, continuing getting better, playing from the pocket with a talented group of wide receivers out around him. This is going to be their toughest test, though. Even though it's at home, this is a really good Kansas City Chiefs defense. They've continued to grow. They've been the most consistent piece, and Steve Spagnuolo, Pete, will have a game plan for keep him in the pocket and force him to play from the pocket.
This game for Lamar Jackson is like last week was for Josh Allen. You have to get over the Mahomes hump. You have to. And all the pressure. Look, he has 2 MVPs because he's going to win this year. But this is about the postseason for Lamar Jackson now. Yeah. And until you beat Mahomes in the postseason, people are still going to question you and about how good you are in the postseason. Let's be real. The first half last week against the Texans, he was not very good.
They were a little rusty.
He was outstanding in the second half. So what do you get from Lamar Jackson today? And I think that's the key. And you mentioned Spagnuolo. Spagnuolo will throw a ton of looks at him. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do to try and contain him. Do you mush rush? Do you do that kind of stuff? What do you do to contain him? Do you spy him? They've spied him in the past when they've played him. So it'll be interesting to see what they do to contain Lamar Jackson. But all the pressure, by the way, is on Lamar Jackson.
You talked about that second half. It was really ignited by that running ability. You know, him taking off, creating plays with his legs. And that's, again, not the most dangerous part of his game. I think as we've seen Zay Flowers, the rookie's been phenomenal this year. They get Mark Andrews back. Now they've got all these weapons you got to worry about, too. So it's a tough task for Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs defense.
Quick follow-up then, because you mentioned what they're going to do, Spags, against Lamar. But they just had Josh Allen last week. What's the differences in similarities there in terms of 2 dual-threat quarterbacks, Pete?
Well, I mean, Lamar's a more dynamic runner.
Much more dynamic runner. I mean, that's the fear, is he can rip one and go 70. You know, Josh Allen usually does not do that. He'll run you over and give you, 15, 20. But Lamar Jackson could turn a broken play into a 70-yard rip. And so I think that's the biggest concern. He's more dangerous running running the football than Josh Allen is. I don't think there's any question about that. I think Josh Allen getting outside and making plays with his arm, Lamar can do that as well. So I think the speed and the ability to rip off the big play, which is why you have to contain him. You have to keep that guy in the pocket. And he's a much better passer, by the way, now than he was the first time he won his MVP.
I think the other thing is, too, if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, and defensively as you look at the matchup versus the Ravens, you know, you go back to that Buffalo Bills game. Well, Stephon Diggs is one of the best receivers in the NFL. Zay Flowers may become that. He's not there yet. This is, you know, it's his rookie year so far. So why not try to see if this young man can beat you? You know, keep Lamar in the pocket. See if any of those talented receivers on the outside can step up and have a big game, and put the pressure on those guys to try to find a way of getting open.
How do you play him in the back end? If you were Lamar Jackson, what would you not want to see on the back end?
Well, again, because of his ability to run, you can't play man. And that's the problem. So now you got to play a zone and different types of zone, whether it's a match zone, and you got to change the construct, change the picture you're talking about, whether it's a quarters coverage or variations. A lot of times, sometimes teams like to kind of cheat and play a little bit of that invert coverage where you've got a safety who's down there for run support, and the cornerback's going to take that back half of that portion of the field. You mix up those different looks, and is it too high? Is it 3 high? Depending on how you go about disguising it, that can slow up the thought process of Lamar Jackson and also the way you're actually preparing for your run fits. That's what it comes down to, is on every single play, you have to have a guy accountable for a gap. Because if you don't want to keep that gap integrity, even on a pass play, and then those rush lanes, you're going to have Lamar Jackson taking off and hurting you. That's probably where he's most dangerous. It's not when it's a design quarterback run. It's when it's a pass and it turns into a quarterback run.
So we continue the matchup theme, but if I were to ask you top matchup, you guys have the similar mindset in terms of what's going to be the key to this game. Pete, I'll start with you. That's Casey's O-line against that Baltimore front seven?
Yeah, because I think, if they can start dictating tempo to that offense, then it's going to be a problem. And when you look at that offensive line, they've had issues this year at this time of the year. I mean, all season they've had all kinds of problems. So I do think if you block them, you'll have success. The tackles have had issues. The tackles have had big-time issues.
And that's what your biggest concern is in this one, right?
Yeah, because when you look at and Baltimore, we talked about this before the show, Brady. Baltimore's not a great edge rushing team, but they scheme up ways to get guys in one-on-one situations and they win. Or even loopers. They get a lot of loopers. Like Van Noy's had a bunch of sacks where he's looped and come free. I think that's what they do well. You have to be keen on your assignments. You have to know that, and you have to be able to hold up and know Tooney as well. Nick Allegretti will start. He played well last week when he went in, and he was in for a long time last week. It wasn't like he came in and played five snaps. He played well last week, so he's going to be big for them in the middle of that defense.
And specifically, this is the matchup that I was pointing to, is Nick Allegretti now in for Joe Tooney, who we found out this week after we did our picks. That line's moved significantly for a point for an offensive lineman, but it goes to show you with Matabike, excuse me, across from him, who's had a career year, 13 sacks. I mean, he's been an absolute dominant force there in the interior of the Baltimore Ravens defensive line. So this is a big-time problem. If you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you want to have any sort of balance whatsoever, you've got to hope Allegretti can hold up, not only in the run blocking, but also in pass protection. And we've seen before in prior years where the Kansas City Chiefs have struggled in these big moments. It's been the offensive line. It's Mahomes running for his life.
And that's Super Bowl.
And that's what you're concerned about in this case. You know, a backup offensive lineman, which, again, Allegretti did a decent job, but you're talking about going from an all-pro and Tooney to Allegretti and then the tackles who have struggled. So if you're Mike McDonald, the game plan is allow those interior defensive players to get that push. You mix in your looks from your edge rushers as well as your nickel back and your secondary force defenders to bring pressure off those edges, and there's nowhere for Patrick Mahomes to go.
Last week, they did a lot of pin and pull and got out. They had the 3 tight ends in, and you know, they used that a lot last week and ran the football against Buffalo. Can you do that? Should you do that against Baltimore?
I don't know that they're going to be able to, because I think Baltimore feels much more comfortable in a construct where they have the extra defender in the box for a couple of reasons. They can match up better on the outside. Their secondary is built to be able to match up with the Chiefs. Outside of Kelsey, who scares you? And I told you before earlier this week, Kyle Hamilton at time is going to be lined up one-on-one. And you're like, all right, that's great.
Great for Kelsey.
Great for Kelsey. We'll see. We'll see how the matchup goes. But that allows you to have the extra defender in the box to stop the
Brady,
run.
I'd rather have Kyle Hamilton on me than 2 guys. Wouldn't you?
It depends who those 2 guys are.
No, I'd rather have Kyle Hamilton on me.
And that's where you're wrong, because sometimes you don't mind those double teams if you can have a guy who can split.
Where did Kyle Hamilton go to school?
Notre Dame.
There you go.
Does that have anything to do with the fact that he's been playing at a Pro Bowl level?
He's played really well, but I'd still rather have one-on-one if I'm Kelsey than 2 guys on me. I don't care who they are.
Okay, so here we go. What would you rather have, Ravens -4.5 or Chiefs +4.5 for this game? What's the pick going to be, Brady?
I've got to stick by my pick early in the week. I don't feel good about it because of the offensive line concerns that we've been talking about, but it's also Patrick Mahomes getting 4.5 points. And look, I'm not saying the Chiefs are winning this game. I think you maybe made that outlandish statement earlier this week. We'll see if it comes to fruition. But because I think this is kind of Baltimore's year. This is the best team that Lamar Jackson has led in his entire career. The most complete team, even when you factor in special teams. That's a big-time concern for me. So I'll go ahead and take the 4.5 points. I think it's going to be a tight, fun game.
I'm going to take the 4.5 points, but I don't think I'm going to need them. I think Mahomes late
Say it
wins
into the camera.
Mahomes wins late.
So
he
Mahomes
gets a nice
money
drive.
line.
Mahomes and the Chiefs on the money line. I think this is one of those situations. Go back to the Rams game about a month and a half ago. The Rams should have won that game, and they moved the football up and down the field on that Ravens. Remember, they lost on a punt return in overtime. They lost on a punt return in overtime.
It's funny how you cherry pick one game, and it's like, well, what about that game? What about this game? What about?
We'll talk about it later.
You will, because you said the Packers were going to be here this weekend.
They should have been.
They're
not.
not.
That game the right way.
Not all of us live in your fictional world, your fantasy world. Where's Jamie Eisenberg when you need him to come up here and help out? You can go back to the fantasy world.
Yeah.
He's been hanging out.
I think the Chiefs win this game, and I think they go to the Super Bowl.
Okay. Pete and Brady certainly appreciate it. Again, the AFC on the line at M&T Stadium. Chiefs and Ravens today, 3 Eastern on CBS and Paramount Plus. And hang around halftime for the P+ original Halo, the world premiere of the new trailer taking place during the break.